All right, well, here with my friend Dylan Gemelli, and you guys got to check out his website, dylangemelli.com, and also great podcast as well, Dylan Gemelli podcast, which I've been on there in the past. You guys will definitely want to check that interview out. And Dylan, always great to connect. Love our conversations. And I want you to introduce yourself to our audience and really how you got into nutrition, fitness, biohacking. What is your story? Tell us about that.
Real quick before I start, I want to say and make a point about this. I interview a lot of people. I meet a lot of people. I talk to some of the most well-respected and brightest people all over the world. I have my top-rated episode is with you. My wife to this day holds every standard of who I interview. Well, was it as good as Dr. Jockers? And I'm always like, if I'm being honest, it was really good, but no, it's not to that level. I just want to put this out there that I haven't met you that long, but man, I connected with you immediately. And I very rarely look to somebody that I could maybe even almost say like a mentor, even though we're friends, where I defer to information. You're one of the very few. And so I just want to say thank you to you for having me here and for the conversations that we have on and off air and for everything you do. You are a literal standard in my book, like a gold standard. So let me just say that first before we start.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, I'll try to keep this one brief because, I want to get to the other things. But I started studying nutrition at 11 years old. Now, unfortunately, it was because I kind of had an eating disorder, body dysmorphia going on. But that's when I started to learn nutrition labels, reading them. I didn't really know what I was reading, but I was learning as I went. And I think you and I both know over time that what we thought was correct back then, even with labels, totally incorrect. So like I'm reading fat and thinking, oh my gosh, we can't eat a lot of this. We got to be careful. And we're looking for low fat and things of that nature. But that's when I started. I was a 4-sport athlete in high school, played college basketball, studied exercise science. And I was doing kinesiology, biochemistry, all of that in college. I took a bad turn. We've talked about, I started modeling and acting and got myself into a lot of trouble and, had to start my life over from scratch at 30 years old. And, I use that as fuel for everything I do now. And it kind of has given me direction in life. And I tell everybody, I went to prison, I made mistakes, and I started over. And from there, I have been nothing but God-driven and driven to do what I was put here to do, and that is teach and help people to improve their quality of life. Now, I had to take a step back and improve mine first because I can't improve others if I don't improve mine. So, I really have been battling the eating disorder and the body image because I work with bodybuilders, I work with athletes, I'm on YouTube and Instagram, and I finally got myself through that actually last year to where I overcame lipophobia. You and I talked about this, me and Ben talked about it, and it's been this eternal fear of fats. To think that they are, as Ben would call, the boogeyman, right? And, I have battled that even as a nutritionist for 15 years, David, 15 years, and I knowing better and teaching people and still being hypocritical. And what I did was one day I woke up and I went into the kitchen. I'll never forget my wife's face. I said, we're going to try something different today. And she knows how spontaneous I am. Like I'll come home with a new car or just what we're going to go do this today. I said, we're going to go to Whole Foods, and I'm going to try this out, and we're just going to try it. I said, worst case scenario, I know how to lose the weight really fast. And I started naming off all these things I told her I hated: avocado, salmon, things I wouldn't touch, butter, ground beef. I said, I'm going to do a 180. And I said, I have now talked to so many people I trust and believe in. Let's see what happens. Because I told you before, I was eating 1,300 to 1,500 calories a day and nothing but vegetables, oatmeal, egg whites, and a little bit of peanut butter. And
real low fat.
Yeah, and working out 2.5 hours a day. So you can imagine that not only was I extremely unhealthy and markers terrible everywhere, but just no focus, very irritable, just very, very hard for me to stay still for 20 and 30 minutes without being hungry or angry. I have gone now from the 13 to 1,500 calorie diet to 27 to 3,000. Fats are 40 to 45% of what I'm eating. And I haven't been this cut, this happy, this full of energy. I don't know ever. I mean, aside from a brief stint of using steroids, I can't say that I've been this cut up and like, defined. I'm not trying to be Mr. Olympia here, but my point is this, is that I spent so many years restricting myself, counting calories, fears of fats, not touching all of these foods that I could have been enjoying. And not only do I have the regret of not enjoying my life in terms of that aspect, but the way that I could have felt better and probably gotten a lot more done. However, instead of looking at it like that, I'm just using it as methodologies of teaching others now how to overcome that, and as a prime example of someone that can.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, there's many people that have done that have gone on this sort of low fat bodybuilder style diet. And maybe seen some weight loss results and physique results, but they didn't feel good. Right. And that sort of diet is not going to feed your brain the way you need to be fed. And also it's going to cause blood sugar imbalances. Right. And that's going to drive more inflammation in your system. And so now you're on really more of a proper human diet. Basically a diet that's going to help balance your blood sugar, keep inflammation under control. It's providing tons of fat soluble nutrients for your body. So, those fats bring nutrients and they help you absorb key nutrients and key compounds as well. So, so critical for your overall health. So I'm really glad that you made these shifts. What does your diet typically look like now? Like what is like breakfast, lunch, dinner? When do you start eating? When do you stop eating? Let's go through that.
Yeah, I have a very, very structured, as you can imagine, day and diet. So first thing in the morning, what I do is I have a couple different like powders I take, which is like urolithin A, Mitopure, and I do a stem regen in those. And that's really all I have initially for the first, within hour I'm up. But then I go for a morning walk after I do prayers in the morning, and I have a serving of Greek yogurt with protein powder and a little bit of fruit in there. And I wait about 2 hours before my first cup of coffee. And an hour and a half is probably okay, but I do 2 hours. And then I do SCT oil instead of MCT. I've talked about that a ton in my coffee with another half scoop of protein powder. And I don't eat until about 2 o'clock because I do cardio before, and that's when I hit it. So I kind of keep my window of all this food within about, I'd say 8 hours probably. So it's funny because I started with about 80 grams of avocado. Now I'm up to 225 a day. And I'm doing four to five whole eggs and 3 egg whites in that meal. A little bit of olive oil and cooked in Kerrygold, always. And I have switched now. That's my first meal. And then the next one is about an hour and a half, 2 hours later. And I switched from 93.7 grass-fed beef to either 85.15 or 80.20, most of the time 85.15. And I cook that in a little bit of Kerrygold. And what I do is I have, about a half a zucchini, serving of mushrooms and green peppers mixed in with it. So it's kind of like my little bit of carbs, during that meal. And I did leave out with the avocado, I do have a piece of Ezekiel bread because I don't do a lot of carbs. I do under 100. So it's mainly from the bread and the vegetables. That's meal 2. Meal 3 is generally either 10 to 12 ounces of either salmon or cod. I was doing that like 7 days a week and I stopped because it's too much fish and I finally got her to get sick of it. So now I'm alternating with either like 12 to 14 ounces of chicken that's pasteurized and very clean, or I do like this pole line tuna with more eggs. It's really good and it's very healthy caught tuna. So that's kind of my combos for the third. And then I just have either like an extra protein bar or shake after the gym, and then I kind of wind it down. But I keep it in that certain window so that I can get that fasting. And it's hard for me to fast with how hard I train, man. It's difficult. I can do it, but it doesn't feel great.
Yeah. How much training are you doing on a daily basis?
So I've cut it down a little bit because I was just extreme, but I do a 30-minute walk every morning, except for non-workout days, I do 50. Mm-hmm. And I kind of do Bible in the year during that now. And
that's great.
Yeah, so I do that. Then I do about 85 minutes of steady state. Now, I've been doing like zone 4 and 5. I've kicked it back to 2 because it's ridiculous to do 5. It's just not necessary. And then I do about an hour and 10 minutes of strength training 4 days a week. I was doing 5. I just cut it to 4 so I can start, this, man, lift smarter, not harder as you get older, right? And I'm feeling better with recovery and actually making more progress that way.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, especially after you're, 30 plus, I'm 43 at this point. So like recovery is so critical, right? Recovery is just as important as the training. Obviously, you got to get the training in, you got to get that time under tension for building muscle, but you also need to really optimize your recovery. So that's so key. And, people like you and I can easily overtrain, right?
Yeah.
It's easy because we're driven, we're motivated people. And so we can, it can be pretty easy to do too much, especially when you're in the gym and, you've got the endorphins going, right? You're just like, okay, more is better. You kind of are ingrained in that. But you start to feel it when you're doing that too much. So I do something similar. I'll work out 5 to 6 days a week with weightlifting. My workouts at most it's 30 minutes. So it's usually upper body, lower body, lower body with one rest day a week. And my workouts are basically about 30 minutes. And that's it. So about 3 hours altogether throughout the week of strength training. But then I also have to focus on optimizing my recovery, or I'll overtrain even with that much.
Yep. And you know how easy it is to overtrain and how bad that is. And I would argue that's had a lot of the detriment on some of the heart markers and things that I've had over time, and why I have a lower ejection fraction possibly. I mean, could be from other things, but I'm trying to be more mindful of that while getting the most out of myself, but minimizing the strain. I don't, one thing I've learned is this constant need to be in these high zones, but I'm burning carbs I'm not eating. So what's the point?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what are you doing to optimize recovery? So you're doing a lot of training, you cut it down a little bit, but what are the things that you're doing to help optimize your recovery?
So one of the things I'm definitely doing is trying to prioritize sleep more. This 5 and 5.5 hours of sleep thing I've been doing is not working for the past 20 years. So I'm trying to get 6.5 to 7, and I'm slowly getting there. So working on circadian rhythm. But when I get home too, I'm trying to not get so caught up into staring at my computer and doing things where my mind isn't resting. Because look, it's a very real thing that if you don't rest your mind after you train, that's part of your body. And if you're doing all of that, that's causing stress, which is not, it's causing inflammation, and it's not letting you recover. So now that I moved and I have a swimming pool outside, I like to get in the water. And for me, with all of the pains that I have built up in myself, that water is a big deal. I'm not talking cold plunge or anything. I don't need all of that. I just want to get in there and relax. And I think that, I spend a lot more time in prayer than I ever have, and that helps my recovery. And just letting myself wind down more and relax is all part of recovery. And I think that gets lost in translation for people. I think that people think recovery, all they think is, massage or this or that. That's not everything, and so I'm trying to look at it from a broader perspective.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, optimizing sleep is so key. I loved what you talked about prayer, just being in a state of gratitude, state of calmness, a state of surrender, right? That's kind of where we're at in prayer is we're either offering up thanks to God, or we're, in a sense, surrendering our will to his. And so that sort of state helps activate our vagus nerve, our parasympathetic nervous system, helps activate deeper healing in our system. Actually activates oxytocin levels as well. So there's a lot of good science on prayer, gratitude, and how that enhances healing. So I'm glad that you're incorporating that. And, also just getting out in the sun. You mentioned the water, but just good sun exposure. I know you're in Arizona now. I'm in Georgia. So fortunately, we both get pretty decent sun. And I try to optimize it. I try to get as much good quality sun without burning, of course, as I can on a day-to-day basis. How about you?
I had to learn a hard lesson, brother, from moving here, because the summer months is it's a constant heat advisory. And every morning I get up and I tell my wife, okay, I'm going to go 30 minutes. I did that for like 3 weeks. And then I came one day, I told her, I said, something's wrong. Like I am not good. And it was like 2 days of being racked out. Well, it was the sun, because I did too much. Now, you can overdo it. So I'm trying to wait until it gets cooler out, which, but I am a big believer of at least 20 minutes out there, given that it's okay to do that with the heat. But, for most months here, it's fine. And for most in general. But when I lived in Iowa, even in the winter, freezing below zero, I was bundling up and getting outside. Yeah. And I really firmly believe at least a good 15 to 20 minutes you should be out there, get good steps in, and take that relaxation along with it, like we keep going back to. It's a combination of, yes, the sun is very important for the vitamin D and for our health, but it's also good to clear our head. And it's good for just your overall state of mind, I think, throughout the day. I really firmly believe that.
Yeah. And I think, Dylan, what you'll also notice is, because you've been eating a lot of the healthy saturated fats and the short chain fatty acids now for what, like about 6 months or so?
Yep.
Yeah.
6, 7 months.
Notice that, those seed oils take roughly 1 to 2 years, to get out of your system. Mm-hmm. And so as you start really transitioning this diet and you've been following it, as you start following it longer, like by the time next summer rolls around, your sun tolerance will be higher. Mm-hmm. Because when you have a lot of seed oils, linoleic acid in your cells, it's highly reactive and highly oxidative. And so your body can't handle as much of the UV light. It causes too much oxidative stress and inflammation in the skin, as opposed to when those cell membranes are rich in healthy saturated fats and monounsaturated fats. Now it's got more oxidative stability. So you can handle more of that UV light. And the reason why UV light's important is it boosts nitric oxide, which dilates your blood vessels. So you get better circulation, better oxygen delivery. And then the infrared that you get as well when you're in the sun helps boost your mitochondrial melatonin. And that melatonin in the mitochondria is the most powerful antioxidant to protect the mitochondria. Mm-hmm. So we really want to make sure we're optimizing that sun exposure. But if you are somebody that has struggled with the sun, obviously you don't want to burn. And as you transition your diet, it actually gives you more heat tolerant, more sun tolerance. So the key compounds that help with that are the healthy saturated fats, as well as lots of antioxidants in your diet. So, whether you're eating, antioxidant-rich fruit, berries, veggies, different things like that. Extra virgin olive oil, right? High polyphenol, extra virgin olive oil, great for helping protect the skin. And then you can supplement with things like astaxanthin, which is kind of the compound that gives salmon its pink color. Mm-hmm. And that's like a natural sunscreen. And also resveratrol can be really helpful as well. For protecting you from burning, and also if you did get too much sun, protecting or enhancing the recovery process.
Definitely. You know what I will bring up too, since you mentioned the diet changes. So I had a blood panel recently, and it's been several months now, and one of the things that a lot of things drastically changed, but my ferritin levels were like 7, 8 for the last 2 years. And my iron was, it was fine, but not having a high ferritin level and no storage is bad. And I couldn't get it up at all. I mean, it was stuck there. Now it's 70, and obviously with the changes. Now my LDL did go up slightly. Well, like 30, 40 points, but that's obviously with the dietary changes. But triglycerides went straight down, and HDL is the highest it's ever been in my life. So liver values went down that were continuously elevated, and several other markers. The other thing that was high was kidney markers, but I'm slamming protein, so I may need to scale back a little bit. And creatine kinase, but I take creatine. So other than that, the panels were really coming out nicely from all these diet changes. A lot of areas that I was having trouble with for many, many years have either leveled out or gotten really strong, in the process.
Yeah, that's key. When we look at the lipid panel, the LDL, HDL, triglycerides, LDL is basically your bus. It's carrying out different fat-soluble nutrients. It's carrying out phospholipids to help rebuild cells. So somebody that does a lot of training, believe it or not, actually should have fairly high LDL, because your body needs that. It's all part of the recovery process. Like, you need to turn over cell membranes. You need those phospholipids being moved around in the system. So having a higher LDL is not an issue. What we want to do is be very metabolically healthy. And the way we can look at metabolic health is what is your triglyceride to HDL ratio? You shouldn't have a lot of triglycerides. It's a sign that your body's not good at getting fat into cells to be used for energy. So you want to be really, basically triglyceride sensitive, right? You want to be good at getting these triglycerides, which are basically a form of, basically it's how your body carries fatty acids around in the blood. You want to be good at depositing those into the cells so they can be used for energy. So your triglycerides should be low, under 100. Okay. And then your HDL should be pretty high. That's kind of the HDL is the bus going from the cells back to the liver, right? And so after the LDL drops off the cargo, the HDL is taking it back, right? And that should be elevated, should be up over 50. And ideally, your triglyceride HDL ratio should be under 2 and close to 1, right? And if you're doing that, it's a sign of good metabolic health. And that's going to tell us that the higher LDL is not an oxidized form of LDL, right? It's going to be a what we call basically a large buoyant LDL that has more fat soluble nutrients around it, like vitamin E, that protects it from oxidative stress. So it's not as problematic or atherogenic. It's not going to lead to atherosclerosis, and so that's key. So you don't have to. A lot of people will freak out about a higher LDL, right? But really the key numbers are the triglyceride HDL ratio. And if you're looking at labs too, you also want to look at your fasting insulin, right? And that should always be under 6. Have you had that done?
I have them right here. So triglycerides were 56, HDL was 79, and
great.
Let's see, we have the glucose was, I believe, 72. Yeah, and hemoglobin A1C 5.5, glucose 72.
Did you get insulin tested by any chance? You're not seeing insulin on there?
Oh, you know what? I think I'm messing those up. Let me see. Hold on a second. Yeah, I did get insulin. I think that one was also 1.3.
Yeah, so you're very insulin sensitive at a 1.3 there, especially with your blood glucose low like that. So you're in great metabolic health. So don't worry at all about the LDL number, right? That's really not an issue, not something you need to be overly concerned about at this point. So,
it was 133 was the LDL number.
Great. Exactly. That's
the
great.
only one. Yeah, the ApoB was the only one that I was, a little bit higher than normal, was about 90. So, but I mean,
again, not to be concerned with that. I wouldn't concern yourself with that at all. So the key is getting good metabolic health keeps inflammation, oxidative stress under control. So, that's super key there. Now, obviously, you're making these nutrition changes. You're really trying to focus on good recovery principles. I know you're an expert when it comes to peptides. Okay. And I've talked about peptides on my podcast and on my blog as well. And I use a couple peptides like BPC 157 and TB4 frag. And these are kind of new. A lot of people aren't familiar, or they may have heard the term peptides. What should my community know about peptides? And what are the ones that you would say, of all of them, perhaps are the most important ones for people to know about?
So one thing I would say is don't let the term peptides scare you or polarize you or anything of the sort. It's actually, if you look at what they are, it's pretty simple and basic. And I think sometimes some of these terms like biohacking, people turn them into something and make them far more complicated than they're not. And I always go back to Bitcoin because so many people made Bitcoin so hard when it first came out. And if you took 30 seconds to read about it, it was like, man, this is really simple. It's like Monopoly money, so peptides, building blocks of proteins, right? So they're just short versions of proteins, and they're made up of amino acids, and they're linked together by peptide bonds. So it's pretty simple if you think about it. Okay, so I'm doing a series. I just started recording it, and I'm releasing the first video to discuss this series, and it's 10 peptides you probably don't know about, but you need to know about. All right, so we got basic ones that most everybody knows. We got your GLP-1s, which is Ozempic or semaglutide, tirzepatide or Mounjaro, and then now retatrutide, which isn't formally approved yet, but coming out, everybody knows what it is. Okay, so because everybody's so hung up on fat loss and what do we got to get our hands on these, and we could get into that shortly. But then, like what you brought up, the next most popular ones, are going to be BPC 157, and rightfully so, mind you, and TB 500, or the different alternative versions of TB, and those are mainly used for healing purposes. And mind you, BPC 157, body protective compound. It says it all in the name if you think about it, right? And I'll try to keep it simple without getting into the science on BPC, on mechanism of action. Essentially, it's used for healing, whether that be speeding up an injury recovery. And I think some people get the wrong mindset. It's like if you tear your ACL, you're not going to take BPC and be healed tomorrow. That's not what's going to happen. It will speed the process, though, and it'll certainly help you to recover a heck of a lot faster. And I've actually seen some pretty miraculous things done with it, but don't think it's a genie in the lamp that you're going to take it and wake up tomorrow and be okay. That's not, I just want to make that clear, but it does work, and it works quite well. Wound healing, another aspect of it, that it can help with burns. That's another thing that it can also be of help with. It can also actually help with fat loss and muscle gain too, if you look into the science behind it and what it actually does. Now, I have a list here of the 10 that I'm going to start talking about on my show that I believe that everybody should be knowing about. I'll rattle off a couple here. I won't go down the whole list, but MOTS-C is at the very top of my list, and that's so intriguing to me. And how I put a ton of work and focus on mitochondrial health and all aspects of cellular health, and making that a priority for our long-term longevity and stressing that. And MOTS-C is actually derived. It's a mitochondrial derived compound, and it helps with obviously mitochondrial and cellular health, but also fat loss and aging, which ties in together with the mitochondria. So that's one at the top of my list. Tesamorellin's my personal favorite, and I'll tell you why. So it's in a class of growth hormone releasing hormone, and it's going to essentially release growth hormone. So instead of you taking exogenous growth hormone, and which is A, very expensive, and B, can come at a cost health-wise, especially if you don't know where you're getting it or you're not careful, and people have side effects to it. When you're allowing your body to release it, that's tremendous. But two, tesamorelin is really used for weight loss, but not at the cost of sacrificing muscle. A lot of people don't think about that with GLP-1s especially, and they're so focused on the weight loss. But when you start sacrificing muscle, which you're gonna when you lose a lot of weight, but it comes at a cost, right? Yeah. And a long-term cost, especially when you're sacrificing too much muscle. Tesamorelin allows you, obviously diet is going to play a part in this, but to drop weight and fat, but not at the expense of dropping muscle. So for me and for most, that's crucial, and it doesn't have a lot of side effects,
Agonist, right? So it helps promote the release of human growth hormone, which is your quintessential anti-aging hormone. It helps build lean body tissue, so bone and muscle tissue. It protects that and helps you build it. Actually puts you in an environment where you can build it if you're doing training. And then on top of that, it helps burn fat for fuel, helps regenerate good collagen for healthier joints, skin, right? So if you want healthier skin, anti-aging benefits from that, healthier joints, less pain in your joints, boosting HGH is going to be really, really beneficial there. Also great for resetting the immune system. So a lot of great benefits there.
Yes, absolutely. Here's another one that I'm going to bring up because we talked about BPC 157. Well, there's a compound that a lot of companies carry, and it's a combination of BPC 157, TB 500. We know this, right? But it also has what's called KPV, which is another peptide for healing, but that's like anti-inflammatory healing. All right. And it offers a ton of benefits, antimicrobial, sorry, I lost my train of thought, and skin healing. And then they take that and they put another compound, GHKU, copper peptide, another anti-aging compound. So this compound has 4 in 1. So these other two that a lot of people that don't get the love that, BPC and TB do, people need to know about these because they're amazing. And these compounds, if you use them right, they really don't have side effects aside from, you can get some injection site reaction of it. And of course, if you get a bad product or you misuse it, anything can hurt you. But in general, they're so safe. And then just a couple more that I just like to mention. Epitalon is one that is going to help with fixing circadian rhythm and regulating your sleep cycle. And you don't take a lot of it. It's like a 3-week thing, and it gets you on track, and you do it 3 or 4 times a year. Same with MOTS-C. It's not a long-term thing, and that's the beauty of some of these. Then like C-Max and Selank, I'm looking at these, and they're helping with anxiety and stresses, and people need to realize they don't need to take all of this crap that you're getting prescribed when you have options like this that you can take for a short term and be safe and help. So I am trying to educate the people on these other options. Do what you want, but I want you to know that there's options, and you don't necessarily always have to go the route of pharmaceutical and get put on all of this stuff that is not necessarily great for you.
Yeah, especially a lot of the the different medications that are associated with anti-anxiety, antidepressants, things like that can be highly addictive and cause long-term problems in your brain. So definitely things that if you can avoid them, definitely do use some of these natural alternatives, much more beneficial. Now, you mentioned injections. Are all these peptides injectables, or are any of them oral? And what would be like the pros and cons of taking some of these? Like I take BPC 157 orally. What are the pros and cons of oral versus injectable peptides?
There's a lot of progress being made. So I've been sitting in on conferences and talking with chemists and some of the smartest people in the world for the past year and a half that they've been working on developing. So like at A4M, I sat in on a conference, and it was a big discussion about transdermals and the progress that's been made in the testing. But this requires so much work and effort. So there's work being done on transdermals. I will tell you this.
So transdermal means like a lotion so that you would put on your skin, a cream. Yep.
Yes. And you can get some right now, but they're coming from research chemical sites. Now, I've worked with a lot of research chemical sites, and there's some great ones. There's also some very, very, very bad ones. So I am only discussing if you're getting the good products in this discussion. It's a totally different discussion if we want to talk about where. Well, that's something probably not for the show. But I'm always helpful with that if anybody needs it. Now, I have one of my favorite method of taking BPC, because I get so sick of injections with my TRT and just prior things, and I have a cream that I've used that is amazing, and it's a TB500 BPC cream. It is out of this world. There's an argument and a valid one in terms of taking capsules that the efficacy goes down quite a bit, and I've seen that. Doesn't mean it doesn't work. That's not what I'm saying. It just means that it's not nearly as efficient, and I have seen that through coaching, through personal, and talking with the chemists that I know that come from all over Europe and really essentially different parts of Asia too, that design these and do this for their whole life. Liposomal is coming out. There's work on that right now. But, look, injection's probably always going to be the best method, but it's nice to have alternative methods that are going to come pretty close. Because let's face it, nobody wants to inject all the time. It's annoying, and it can be painful, and sometimes you forget, and it's not great to have vials in your fridge, have to reconstitute things, have sharps containers. I mean, it gets old. It does. And so there is a lot of work being done. I've seen things that work. I've used things that work. I've used things that aren't as efficient but still work. You just have to understand each methodology and how they work and what to expect when using them, so you have the right understanding. I always like to give people, I never misguide people on what they're getting out of things. I want you to know. Okay. So the expectation level needs to be there properly.
Yeah. And like taking oral BPC 157, it's going to have a larger effect on the gut, which, that's important. You got to heal leaky gut, right?
Right.
But, if you've got tennis elbow, you're not going to get as much of that BPC 157 into the elbow as you would if you injected it right in, but you're going to affect the gut more, right? And you might get some trickle down effect and just reduced inflammation that will enhance the healing process. So taking it orally can still be beneficial, just not as directly impactful for that injury as the injection would be.
That's right. That's perfectly said. And I left that out, and that's exactly right. And that's one of the benefits of BPC that draws me to it. And obviously you too, is the help that it has with the gut. And so, yes, that is very, very accurate. There's a lot of things on the horizon, but they have to be thoroughly tested. And I feel very confident that there's going to be a lot of different things coming out very soon.
Yeah, that's really good to know. And you're creating a course here to help people on peptides. Is that what you were saying?
Yes. So I've got a thing coming out on my podcast, and it's a series, and it's a 10 part, it's a 10 part, well, I guess 11 part, because there's an intro, but it's a 10-part series on, like I say, 10 peptides that you probably don't know about, but you need to know about. And that list, I could make that list 100, brother, but everybody's lists are their lists.
You had to trim it down. People get overwhelmed if you're talking about 100 different peptides. So
yeah,
check out the Dylan Gemelli podcast for that if you want to learn more about peptides. Now, let's transition and kind of just close with your top biohacking strategies, the things that you think really move the needle that people can plug into kind of their day-to-day lifestyle.
You know what? Most of these strategies are free of charge. Literally, that's one of the things that before I get into that, and I don't like to answer like a politician, but just real quickly, most people think with biohacking, it's like this big extravagant thing where you got to go spend $1 million and buy all these new technologies and machines and everything. You don't. They're being created. They're there, and great. I love going to the events and checking them out and trying them, but I'm not going to go drop a mortgage payment on one of these per month to pay 70 grand for a machine that I don't need. Okay. It's not, you don't have to do that. There's some great things being developed, and I love them, and I love to go talk about them. But simply put, we've mentioned quite a few of these. I think that one of the most important things is getting moving right when you get out of bed, and like after you've woken up and done whatever. Like my routine is I say prayers in bed, say one over my wife. I get up, I take a shower, I trim around my beard, wash my face, and then I get moving. I'm not going out and running right away and everything like crazy. I'm just saying, get outside and get moving. Start your day off. And if you say you don't have time, make time. Get up earlier. Go to bed earlier. Very simple. Prioritizing sleep, like we discussed, very important. But, look, I understand everybody's not going to be down with like you and I's religious preference or praying. For me, that's the ultimate. I can't, that there's nothing better than that. But if okay, let's just say you don't, fine. I'm not going to push it on you. At least meditate or get your mind right and get outside and take your mind away from stresses. A couple other things. I used to eat always really late at night. I stopped doing that. I'm not, I completely stopped doing that. I especially stopped. I used to do like oatmeal right before bed, and I thought it was helping me cut weight. Don't ask me why. And so I stopped doing that. I prioritize sleep, and I start winding myself down a lot better. I'm not staring at my computer, not staring at screens, and trying to keep more tranquil environments at night, and just trying to make sure that you're structured with your diet, that you have some sort of structure there. I'm not saying you got to go to the extremes I do where I weigh everything and do everything, but I'm saying, keep things consistent and keep the quality of what you're having the best that you can. If you have to sacrifice spending money on something else you don't need, spend it on what you put in your body. I understand that there's things that are expensive, but you can get around it. You really can, and you can sacrifice things you don't need. And then really, I think it's understanding the right essential vitamins and nutrients that you need to be taking. There's things that you don't need to take that you can do without, but there's certain things that you definitely do. And I think prioritizing that, getting it from food first, but understanding there's some things that you can't get everything you need from. And, just making sure that you're taking precautions with things. One of the things that you could make a testament on, just watching like the soaps you buy, all of these things that they build up toxicity. They do. It might sound crazy, but just taking time to go through and go, man, look at what this has in it. Look at what this has in it. And then, cutting those things out because it builds up and it builds up, and these mysterious things that happen, they're not so mysterious. So that would be my recommendations. All of that stuff I said was pretty much free.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Reduce your exposure to toxic chemicals. The more you can be intentional about that, the better off you are. These things do build up, like you were talking about. We have an epidemic of toxicity in our society. And so it's really critical that we're as intentionally focused as possible. And good hydration obviously will help your body to eliminate a lot of those. You got to pee and poop your way to good health. So, make sure you're prioritizing that, and that will really help you. So,
That's
Dylan, this has
exactly
been
it.
a really great interview. Lots of great nuggets for people. And of course, you guys can check out the Dylan Gemelli podcast as well, where he's got some great interviews, and he's going to be doing that peptide series as well. So be sure to check that out. Dylan, any last words of inspiration here for our audience?
I just want to make sure that everybody knows two things. One, everything that you've done wrong in the past, you're going to keep making mistakes. You got to use that as something that builds upon where you're going. You got to use it as a lesson. You got to use it as something positive, because there's something there that is positive that you can take from it. I got reduced to prison and I use it as fuel, and I find so many things that I take from that and I use every day to build what I've become. And I realize that I can always do a little bit better. I don't beat myself up over anything anymore, but I never get complacent. And then number two is not getting overwhelmed, because everything is fixable if you just take the time to understand, take care of yourself, prioritize your health as opposed to anything else. And when you do that, I mean, look, life is life. Things are going to happen. I just say, if you give it to God and you put your trust there, you're going to be just fine. And that's what I've been trying to do. And the more I've done that, brother, the more things have worked out.
Amen. Great words of advice there. Great words of inspiration. And Dylan, again, thanks so much for your time. Guys, check him out, Dylan Gemelli Podcast. And we'll see you on a future podcast episode. Be blessed, everybody.